Okay, so in this video, I'm going to show you guys how to get proper artwork on your Emulation Station build, whether it's for Project Eris or for AutoBleem. And while we're doing that, I'm going to show you guys where and how to load themes up for Emulation Station as well. This is Steve from Restalgia, and let's get started. Alright guys, so here we are on Emulation Station, and I can tell you guys the number one question I get in the comment section or in private messages is how are people supposed to get artwork displayed on their Emulation Station build? So when you go into one of the categories, as you can see, I've got a bunch of games that are loaded up in here, and they do run. If I click on one, they will play. The problem is that this visually isn't as nice as it could be. As you can see, it doesn't have any information about the release date. It doesn't have developer, publisher. It doesn't have a synopsis of the game. There's no artwork. And there are two main ways that we can actually correct this. So the first way would be if you have one of the USB dongles for Wi-Fi, whether this is on AutoBleem or on Project Eris, it doesn't matter as long as you're connected into the internet. What you can go ahead and do is press the start button on your controller. You're going to select the scraper option, and then you've got a couple of options here in terms of where you can scrape from. The first one says the Games DB, and then the second one is Screen Scraper. Now, the Games DB was one that was down for quite a while, and it does come up, but it's still not 100% reliable, so you may have to flip-flop between the two in order to get some proper scraping done. I'm going to personally use Screen Scraper for this process, and then we're going to go down to Scrape Now. So the next set of menus are going to give us a few different options here. The first one is if we can filter either by only missing images, or if you want to just go ahead and just do all games, even if they have an image. In this case, I don't have any images, but I am going to select only missing images. Next, we can actually choose a specific system, or we can select all of our systems. So if I jump into that, as you can see, everything is checked off. Now for this, I'm going to go ahead and remove that, and I'm only going to scrape for Nintendo. And I'm going to go ahead and find my Nintendo Entertainment System right over here. That's the only one I'm going to do just for this. Then we're going to hit back. And then we've got an option here that says user decides on conflict. And essentially what that means is when it's looking to match artwork with a game, if it comes up with a few different options and the algorithm is not 100% sure which one it should select, it's going to say, hey, we've got a couple of options here. Which one would you prefer? Now you can turn this off and it'll automatically choose the one that's most likely going to represent the game properly. But you will find that it is not 100%. None of these scrapers are ever 100%, and you will have to optimize and tweak things and adjust things later. So with that being said, I'm going to leave the user decides on conflict, and I'm going to go ahead and hit start. Now, as you can see, the first thing that it's going to do is say, hey, we found a game. Do we want to select this one? The answer to this is yes. As you can see, it's looking for Donkey Kong for NES. So we're going to go ahead and select Donkey Kong and press X. It's going to do the next game, Legend of Zelda. We can hit X. Little Samson looks good. And we're just going to follow this process for the 8 games. Super Mario Bros., Super Mario Bros. 2, and then finally Super Mario Bros. 3. So once we do that, it's going to finalize and say, hey, we scraped 8 games successfully. Once we hit OK, they should be visible. So we're going to go ahead and back on out of here. We're going to switch over to our NES, which is right over here. We're going to jump into it, and there we go. So as you can see, we now have box art, we've got ratings, we've got all of the information as well as a synopsis. And if there is a lot of information in the synopsis, as you can see, it's going to do this scroll type of text visual, which is actually fairly nice. Now this process is really good for people who have Wi-Fi dongles. The problem is that not everybody does, and additionally some of the people who do have it still have problems. So I'm going to show you an alternative method that you can do without a Wi-Fi dongle to get all of your artwork scraped and loaded up onto your USB, and it's all actually done right on your computer. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my USB, pop it into my computer, and I'm going to see you guys in a quick second. Okay, so here we are on the computer now, and what I'm going to do is show you guys a few different things. As I mentioned, I'm going to show you guys how to scrape all your Emulation Station games so you have proper artwork and metadata, but I'm also going to show you guys how to load additional themes for Emulation Station and where to put them on your USB drive. Now there are a ton, like literally hundreds and hundreds of different Emulation Station themes, and they're all user created by a whole whackload of different people. So I only selected one that I actually like a lot, and this is one that if you were running a Raspberry Pi, you'd have access to right in their own built-in database, and you'll find it on GitHub. You go ahead and download it. Now I'll leave links to it in the description below as well, if it's one that you like. Now, in terms of scraping, we're actually going to need an application called Scraper, and you can actually get it right from this website, scraper.net. Again, links will be in the description down below. When you go ahead and select the download button from the top menu, it's going to kick you right on down to the bottom, and you can select what operating system you are using. Now, I'm obviously on Windows, so that's what I'm going to choose, but if you are on Linux or Apple, this is supported, and you can absolutely use the software. You'll just click on it, download it to wherever you want, and you will end up with this zip file right over here. You right click, we're going to extract it to its own folder. I've already done that. Mine is right over here. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on that. And inside it's going to have all of the different information as well as a bunch of different language options. We're just going to scroll on down till we see the Scraper UI.exe application, and we're going to double click on that application. So now it's going to load, and if this is your first time where it says please wait downloading resources, for me it didn't take very long at all, but the very first time that I did this, it actually took a very long time. And I'm talking about close to like 30 minutes for it to properly get all the proper databases and things like that. Now that being said, when you get started, you're going to be loading up a screen that looks like this. And in here, you've got a couple of options. You can either use a Screen Scraper account, which I do have, and I do recommend it if you go on to the Screen Scraper main website. I think it's screenscraper.fr or something along those lines, and you can get in there and create an account. I highly recommend it. It tends to be better, and their entire website essentially runs off of 3 different tiers. So they've got people who are just anonymous users like what we would do in this video. Then they have a second tier where you've got a registered account, and then they have third tiers where there's people who are actually paying monthly donations or things like that, and they get boosted into another tier. Now what happens is if there's too much load on the server, the free users that are not active with an account are the ones who are going to get cut off first. Then the main account users are going to get cut off, and then hopefully it doesn't end up going this far, but then you would start seeing people with paid accounts that would start falling off and not getting proper scraping options. Again, I do recommend it, but for this video, I will show it to you as if I do not actually have a Screen Scraper account. So we're going to go ahead and choose I don't have an account and I don't want to register. Yes, I'm sure. Now, as you can see, I currently have a Project Eris build going on right over here. I'm going to actually close that, but the process is actually quite the same with AutoBleem. So I've gone ahead and pulled up my AutoBleem build. My AutoBleem build is the one on the left-hand side. My Project Eris build is the one on the right-hand side. And as you can see on both builds, we have a ROMs folder right on the root of our USB drive where all of our Emulation Station games would go. So as you can see, it's right over here on AutoBleem, and then over on the right-hand side, the ROMs folder is going to open up and it'll look identical for the Project Eris side of things. Now for this video, I'm going to focus on the Project Eris side of things just because I loaded that one up a little while ago with a bunch of my games, and my AutoBleem build doesn't have very many in here. So I wanted to use the Project Eris build just to show you guys a more in-depth tutorial. So we're going to go ahead and close that. We're going to grab back to our Scraper UI software, and then we're going to select I don't have an account, I don't want to register, yes I'm sure, and we're going to hit next. Now it's going to go ahead and take us to a front-end selection. Again, there is another step that is going to have to download a whole bunch of resources. It may take 15, 20, 30 minutes depending on your internet speed in order for us to get there. We're going to be given an option for a front-end selection. We've got Launchbox, Recalbox, RetroPie, and Generic Emulation. Although it may seem natural to go to Generic Emulation, we do not want to do that. We actually need to go to Recalbox, and the reason for that is because it builds a special XML file that tells Emulation Station where to locate the image and what that image is supposed to represent and all the metadata that goes along with it, whereas the generic emulation builds a BAT file that the Emulation Station on the PlayStation Classic doesn't actually use. So we're going to go over to Recalbox, we're going to select that, we're going to hit next, and then it's going to ask us to select our ROMs folder. Now in this case, Recalbox doesn't have every single ROM folder that we may use with Emulation Station. So I'm going to go ahead and select this box, include non-Recalbox ROM folders, and then we're going to have to navigate to our folder. So we're going to hit the folder button. We need to find our USB drive, and for me, mine is on the iDrive right over here. And then if we scroll on down, we've got our ROMs folder. We're going to select the ROMs folder. We're not going to select any of the internal folders, and we're going to hit OK. Now it's going to go ahead and scan everything, and we should come up with about 36 or 37. It looks like 38 different systems are detected. You're going to have roughly the same number of systems because we all have more or less the same build, unless any of you guys have customized things yourself. Now don't worry, it's not going to scrape all the artwork for all of these games. It's only going to scrape artwork for games you currently have in those folders, but this is what it's going to give us access to out of the box. Now we have to hit next. Now it's going to show us, okay, we're going to make a gamelist.xml, which is what we want for Emulation Station. It's going to give us an option here for 4-image mix. We'll talk about that in a second. Additionally, it's also going to try to download some 3D box art. Again, I'm going to talk to you guys about this in a second. Now you can choose finish and it'll just start scraping, or if you hit next, you'll be able to customize things, which is what we want to do. So we're going to hit next. So now that the scraper application is fully opened up, it's also important to note, as you can see, this is a beta. It's not 100%. You are going to still run into some problems. You may end up scraping for North American titles and get a few PAL titles in there. Things like that may happen, so just keep that in mind. It's not perfect, but it is actually fairly good. What we want to go ahead and do is go through our menu list right up along the top. Now our games in our front end, it needs to say Recalbox. If it does, we're good. We're actually not going to touch anything else in this section. The game list as well, we need it to say Emulation Station gamelist.xml. That's also very important. And then we're going to go over to the metadata section, and this is where we can kind of choose what we want. In terms of case sensitive, you want it to search for things as is, or all lowercase, all uppercase, same with descriptions. You've got a bunch of other configurations that you can choose. Keep the file name decoration, keep undecorated file name. You can do a whole bunch of stuff. I just leave things the way they are in terms of the metadata. But when we go to our media section, this is where I kind of personally mix things up a little bit. Now, as you can see, it's got a few different options for media types. So it says internal mix, then you've got just a single image, then you've got the potential to display a game manual, and then you've got the option to display video. Now, I will mention video is not functioning on Emulation Station, or at least I haven't been able to get it to work. So that may be something that's coming down the pipeline, but for whatever reason, when I tried this option, I wasn't able to get any of the videos to play. Now you can go ahead and choose this internal mix where it actually has 4 different images. So as you can see, you've got a background there. You've got 2 different types of box art here. You've got the game cartridge and the actual box art, and then you've got the logo. Now you can change that to 5 image mix and it'll show you the regions. And then you can also shoot it down to 3 where it gets rid of one of the game cartridges, then 2 where it's just the logo and the image, then 1 and it's just a screenshot. And these are fairly nice options. The problem with this is that it has to download 4 or 5 different files, compile them properly, and then display them. And if it can't find the proper files for the game that it's looking for, you can run into some things that kind of look incomplete and inconsistent. Additionally, it's going to look for 3D box art, which is right over here. Now, I don't want it to look for 2 different things. I just want to find one, and I'm going to go ahead and pick that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the 3D box art. I'm going to remove it. And from here, I'm not actually a big fan of this internal mix style. I'm going to shoot over to image, and instead of a screenshot, I'm just going to go ahead and scroll through until I find just the box art. 2D box art is what I'm hoping to get here. So 3D box art, that's the side. There's the 2D box art from the front, but ultimately it's whatever you guys want. You can filter through things and see what you like. Again, don't bother with videos. They don't work. And when you're going with the kind of kits that have 3, 4, 5 images kind of built into one, keep in mind it takes substantially longer to scrape for those, so you're gonna have to wait quite a while for that. But I'm gonna be happy with the box art that is 2D, just the way you see it here. That's what it's gonna scrape for all of the games. And we're more or less good to go. There's not too much that we're going to adjust in the miscellaneous section. Everything here looks okay. And then in terms of overlays, you've got options to download overlays for Emulation Station. I'm not going to bother with overlays right now. If you want to mess around with it, you can, but that's entirely up to you. Now, additionally, let's say you want to do, for media, you want to do 2D box art for this console, let's say for Sega Genesis and everything else, but specifically for Game Boy, you want to have 3D box art. You can actually go into that specific console, then you can select use specific configuration for Game Boy. You can select that, and then you can mix things up a little bit. Now, I don't want to do that. I want everything to stay consistent all the way through. If you've clicked down here on one of the consoles, please remember you do have to go back and click this All Systems button up top in order for it to be effective on everything. Once you're happy with kind of how things look and what you're going to end up getting, all that's really left for us to do is hit this play button. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. It's going to say, hey, are you sure you want to scrape all the systems? It's going to take a long time. Should we continue? The answer to that, of course, is okay. And now it's going to start working. Now, I will mention this process takes a very, very long time. I'm talking about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, could take an hour, 2 hours, depending on how many games you actually have. So keep that in mind. The process is actually very similar if you're scraping right on the console as well. It's not a quick process, so be prepared for that. As you can see, I'm still working on Little Big Planet. We're 30 seconds in and it hasn't even scraped that artwork yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just skip over this process and I'm going to fast forward. You're going to see that everything is complete. Now, looking at all of the information that it's provided, as you can see, one of the games that we were trying to scrape for was unable to be found, which means that we're not going to have any metadata for it and we're not going to have any artwork for it, which isn't a big deal. Again, you know, 1 out of 226 is pretty good. And like I said, this is still in beta, so there's still some hiccups that we're going to see. And some of the artwork may not be 100% what we wanted, but I think it's pretty accurate and it's certainly going to be good enough for most people. Now, in terms of the length of time, that took almost 18 minutes, and that was for scraping 226 games. So keep that in mind. If you have the entire SNES catalog, for example, which is, 800-900 different games, you're going to be in here for just that console. It's probably going to take you about an hour to an hour and a half. So if you start building up big databases with thousands of games, keep in mind you may want to set this to run and then walk away from your PC, maybe check on it in a few hours and see how well it's doing. But this isn't something that's going to be a very quick process, so just keep that in mind. Anyways, now that we've got all of those games scraped, I'm going to go ahead and hit this checkmark button. It's going to say, yep, we're good to go. We no longer need this because our scraping is done on our USB drive, and that's actually more or less it. We don't need to do anything else other than pop our USB drive into our PlayStation Classic and test it. But before we do that, I do want to show you guys what it looks like on the USB drive to show that the games have been scraped properly. So if we go into our ROMs folder and we scroll down to a console that we know we did, for example, PSP, I'm going to double click on that, and as you can see, I've got 5 PSP games, but there is a gamelist.xml file that's here. So if I double click on that and I bring it over here, you're going to see that it's going to give us all the information, what console it's for, PSP, the software used was Scraper, where was the database, screenscraper.fr, and then it's also going to provide you the information of the game as well as the description, release date, and all that information. And then when it comes down to the image, which you can see right over here, there is a directory, and it says on the media folder inside of images there's going to be a God of War - Chains of Olympus PNG. Now that is actually going to be right over here. Here's that media folder. We're going to double click it. Then here's our images folder. We're going to double click that. Top and center is our God of War Chains of Olympus PNG. If we click on it, this is actually going to be the artwork that's displayed. So there it is. We're going to go ahead and close that, and that's going to be true for any of the other consoles and any of the other things that we scraped for. If you ever needed to manually adjust something, you could absolutely do that. Additionally, you can also put in custom artwork here. So if you had a different cover art or some sort of fan art that you like better, as long as you name it God of War - Chains of Olympus and it's a PNG file, you can actually put it in here in place of this, and that's what will display on Emulation Station. But in terms of scraping, we're done. I'm going to show you guys that in a quick second. But I did say I wanted to show you guys how to load themes up, and themes are actually really simple. Essentially, you're going to go ahead and find a theme that you like online. All you got to do is go Emulation Station theme downloads, take a look. There's literally hundreds and so many different options that you can choose. I personally like this Tronky Fran one, so I'm going to double click on that. And inside of that folder, you're going to see it has folders just like our ROMs folder with all of the different consoles loaded up into it. It's also got a little bit of information as to how things are supposed to be compiled, but that's what you're looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. On the root of our USB drive, we're going to go into Project Eris. Then we're going to go into OPT. Then we're going to go into Emulation Station. Then we're going to go into .emulation station. And then we're going to go into Themes. And as you can see, we only have one theme in here, the simple theme, which is the stock one that we would have seen. We're going to grab our folder, drag and drop, and we're going to allow it to copy over. Now, if you're using AutoBleem, in order to find out the location for your themes is actually going to be within the RetroArch folder, then we are going to go down to the Retro Boot folder. Then in here, there's an Emulation Station folder, then a .emulation station folder, and then our themes folders right here as well. And we just go ahead and crank that in there, and the process is exactly the same. We let it transfer, and once that's done, all we need to do is take our build, pop it into our PlayStation Classic, and test it out. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and switch over to the PlayStation Classic now. Okay, so now we've loaded right on into Emulation Station. So regardless of whether you are on AutoBleem or Project Eris, you're going to have to log into Emulation Station, and you should be prompted right over where we are right now. The first thing I'm going to show you guys is that box art. So as I said, we scraped for all consoles, so everything here should have box art with the exception of one title, and I believe it was a Nintendo DS title. It was one of the wrestling titles, I think. So we're going to go ahead and jump into Nintendo DS, and as you can see, we now have all of the metadata and all of the artwork. So that's actually pretty cool. Now, keep in mind, it's not 100% perfect. So as you can see, the metadata is actually in French, and that's not something I particularly wanted, but it is what it is. In a situation like this, we can actually correct that. So what we'll do is we'll hit select on our controller. We're going to scroll down to edit this game's metadata. Then we're going to go down to the scrape button down on the bottom. It's going to go ahead and take a look for that game. It's found it. We're going to go ahead and select that game. It's going to choose it. And then we are going to save. And we are going to go ahead and back on out of here. And as you can see, the metadata is now gone. It's not in French. It wasn't doing us any good anyways, but now we do have the English build. So you can choose if that's something that you wanted to do. Not all games have metadata when you're scraping with the internal scraper. Some do, some don't, so just keep that in mind. A lot of the games that I'm going to see here are not in English, which is a little bit annoying, but that is going to be par for the course with this software. As I said, it is in beta, so you're not 100% sure what you're going to be getting in terms of all of the information and whether or not it's going to be accurate to you as an individual. So we're going to scroll on down, and as you can see, all the games do have their artwork. Everything looks pretty good with the exception of a couple French titles. Some games, again, are not going to have any metadata. It just depends on the game itself, but we do have some artwork for it, so that's fine too. And I believe it was this game right here, the WWE SmackDown vs. Raw 2010. In a situation where something doesn't get scraped, again, we can go to select, edit the game's metadata, and we're going to scroll all the way down towards the bottom to scrape. You may have better luck this way, and in which case we did right over here. So we're going to select that. It's going to go ahead and save it. And now we've corrected that problem. So you may have to go in and do that. The same is going to be true if you found a game that has the wrong region artwork that's been provided. For example, let's say you are looking at Super Nintendo or Nintendo 64, for example. I believe all of these are going to be North American, but hypothetically speaking, if one of these were the PAL region, same process. Press select, edit the game's metadata, and then re-scrape for it, and hopefully that will fix the issue. But that's more or less it in terms of the scraping artwork. Everything is good to go. But another thing that we had just done was load up a different theme, and that is what we're going to switch over to. So it doesn't really matter where you are. If you hit the start button, you're going to have access to your main menu. We got to scroll down to UI settings. We're going to select that, and then we're going to go to our theme set. So once we hit enter on that, we are currently on simple. So we're going to select that. We're going to go back, and this may take a second or so for it to switch over. And now that it's done that, this is the new theme. And I absolutely love this theme. I just think it's visually stunning. When you go to the different consoles, they're very nice photos. It just really, really pops. So this is one that I highly recommend. Now, like I said, there are so many, hundreds of different themes, lots of specific themes that are based off of certain characters, off of certain consoles. There's replica themes to the classic console, Super Nintendo classic themes, all those sort of things. So definitely just have a peek. The choices are endless, but that's more or less how you do it. So I hope this video has helped some people out get the data that they were hoping for and getting the images loaded up into Emulation Station, regardless of which build you decided to go for. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you guys so very much for watching. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Hit the thumbs up button if you guys liked the video. Hit the thumbs down button if you didn't find it helpful. And let me know in the comment section below what you guys think of all of this stuff that's going on with the PlayStation Classic. Was this video helpful? Was it not? Is there another thing that you guys need some help with? Let me know in the comment section down below. But that's all I've got for you. Thanks again for watching, and I'll talk to you guys again real soon.